Welcome to Business Aspirin, pain relief for business. Clint has managed a restoration company in Dallas since 2008 and is one of the top drying experts in his region. Clint is also the co-founder of JobDocs, a software developed to help his team manage their overwhelming volume of projects. On the podcast, Clint brings together business managers and leaders to share with you how they have overcome their business pains and how you can too. And now, here's your host, Clint Junell.
So, first of all, state your name for me.
David Grove.
David Grove. David, and your company name is BYLT.
BYLT.
And
BYLT.
BYLT, not spelled normally. I don't know where that comes from. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. It's actually a software company I started first. Okay. And then when the restoration company started, I just took the same company parent name.
Okay.
Used it for that instead.
That's interesting because I know you relatively well from some relationships and other stuff, but I didn't know you had a software company you started first.
I have a software company. Basically, it's an idea. It's an idea I've been working on for about 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And it's not anything like yours because it's not job management or anything, but it still has to do with construction. But it'd probably take us another couple hours to go over that.
Yeah, talk about that. And several years to figure out how you actually get it built. Dude, I'm telling you, I understand how that goes for sure.
Well, so my idea is to barely build it and then hopefully sell the idea. It's more.
Yeah.
Because it'll be a good one once I get down that road. But
nice. Well, hopefully, and I'm happy to help any way I can on all that. This is being recorded and is going to be published. So let's not talk about any of that right now, just in case somebody hears and they steal your idea. I don't want anybody stealing your idea. You'd be like,
that's right.
Damn it, Clint. I'd be like, hey, dude.
Keep it simple. Yeah.
Let's not chat about some of that right now. So let's talk about BYLT as a restoration company. And let's talk about first of all, how you got into the industry.
Okay. So BYLT as a restoration company started in January 2020. I had in the past general managed a couple of other restoration companies and made them both highly successful, which is then I had some people back me to start my own because they saw what I did with those ones. How I got into the industry is a longer story because I've always been in construction and restaurants and pretty much every industry known to man for a very long time. But now, I don't know, restoration found me more than I found it, I guess. So back right after high school, I started my first business throwing music festivals. So I got $250,000 loan to do that and failed miserably at that for 4 years while I was doing construction and doing restaurants and learned things the hard way. That was my college. And then after that, I kind of went... I went into owning and owning construction businesses, computer businesses, building computers, did some software building kind of things. And then I've done everything from run vineyards and wineries to climb trees around power lines, work as guides in Montana and Alaska. You name it, I've probably done it. A lot of crazy stuff in there.
Sure. No, I know some of those stories, right? Just in other conversations that we've had, or I've been near you when you're having conversations with others. And so I've heard some of these things and I've always thought, man, that's unique. And Dave's certainly an interesting individual.
Yeah. So then
some of those aspects,
all those skills for some reason somehow kind of came together. And then when I was asked to do restoration, just all fell in place, and I just was really naturally good at it because I had the construction background, I had the tech background, I had business knowledge, a lot of business knowledge. So it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of built for general managing them at first. I found being an owner is much different than general managing very quickly in 2020.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a lot of similarities too. So, is still managing people and expectations.
Well, so let's talk about 2020 because you start in 2020. In January 2020, you kick off BYLT.
We actually kicked it off November 19.
Okay.
So we started like building out our building. We started putting the map together of what this is going to be because I already had a couple estimators, a couple coordinators that were coming from other companies. that I had worked with in the past or worked for the company I was just with. So I had a pretty good plan, a map, but I needed a few months to put that map together, build out a job data system, and really just build everything out, right? And then get on a few TPAs. It took us till January to get on a TPA or two because coming out the gate, we wanted to come out the gate strong at 3 million was our first year goal. Work done. We ended up hitting about 5.8 that first year, work done, just because mainly my relationships, my general manager, and we had one sales guy doing property management. And it was way more than we thought.
Sure.
Second year, we were hoping for 5. Again, we hit about 11.8. And then the third year, we kind of plateaued, and now we're implementing EOS and everything to kind of push past that plateau.
Sure. Break through that stage, right? There's that barrier of that level that kind of makes you go, okay, I got to get past this stuff. Yep. So there's some things that you've mentioned that would be interesting to talk about. One is, you get started in 2020, and then first we need to tell people what part of the world you're in, so they'll kind of get an understanding.
Maryland, DC. So our office literally sits right in between them. I think in Maryland alone, there's, I don't even know, it's hundreds of little cities and towns. So you're a lot of business.
You're in the hotbed of the political world, right? Yep. Like there's a whole lot of the political structure that exists in the area that you're in.
Yep.
So then we get into mid-March of 2020, and here, at least in Texas, kids don't go back to school. They go for spring break, and then our spring break in Texas is mostly middle of March, somewhere in those couple of weeks around St. Patrick's Day. I think other parts of the country may be different, April or whatever. But so
there's a March or April, it seems like.
Yeah. So we go to spring break with the kids, and then they don't go back to school. And you're in the middle of an environment where, I would assume it's very different there, but it was still quite of an impact in Texas in terms of lots of businesses, people are staying home. You've got this work. So you still in that first year well exceeded your target.
Yeah. Every month too.
So for us, like for the listeners that have listened to this in any capacity whatsoever, know that I have a software company. I don't have a restoration company. So that's why we're talking to restoration guys right now.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, like it tailed off a little bit for a month and a half or so, where it kind of slowed some things down. So you were taking off, just getting started and like blowing the doors off of it. And I think a lot of these guys that are listening to the podcast that are trying to go, okay, well, how do we fit business plans? There's a lot of people, Dave, that they try to get past $1 million, right? Mm-hmm. They're trying to get their first million.
It depends on your market for sure for that.
Sure. So let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about in the middle of a pandemic, the start of a pandemic where the world was crazy in a market, honestly, seems like it would be a little more locked down. Texas is obviously a little more open in regard to that, right? You can look at.
I'll be honest, Maryland was pretty open comparatively to most. We had a bit of a lockdown, but it wasn't. I think there was like 3 weeks where it was a hard one. But after that 3 weeks, it was kind of like, well, we're going to loosen up. Okay, we're going to loosen up more. We were one of the first to loosen up on things. So,
So then in that case, you were able to do business and people were, obviously willing to let you come in.
there was still definitely an impact because like even when we had our building open, we opened our building finally in February. And we can't even move into it yet. And everybody's working from home. So you're trying to start a business working from home, which is really, really tough. And I don't know, there's still quite the impact of just you couldn't quite get started. You still had 25% of customers like, no, until everything settles down, we're not comfortable.
Okay, so then let's talk about your wheelhouse in that first year. Right, to hit, you said 5.8 in year one, where your market or your target was 3. What were you doing in that year?
There was a lot of large loss coming into us because people knew my general manager for the kind of reconstruction work we do. And then just naturally, along with that, getting onto the right TPAs at the right time fed a lot of mitigation work. And then, of course, reconstruction work behind that.
Sure.
But the large losses were a pretty big surprise so quickly because I think they just knew we could do them, we could handle them, they can really send anything to us. So they already knew that going out the gate,
because they knew who your team was.
Yeah.
So that lends to, if somebody's starting a business and they're listening to this podcast and they're trying to solve problems and pains of growing a business, is setting it up right to begin with.
Yeah. So
right people.
One of the biggest things I'm learning, even 3 years into this thing, I always knew it was about people first, right? So like I always had my own little chart, like people, process. I'm trying to remember what my old one used to be. It used to be people, process, and then values. And then the middle was vision. But with EOS, it's about the right people in the right seat. You start to get granular with it. And that is a big thing. Like everybody in the company has to have your values. Everybody in the company has to get it. That's a very defined term, that they actually get what you're doing. They have to want to do what you're doing. If they don't want to be here, they shouldn't be here. And then they have to have all kinds of capabilities to do it: emotional, intelligent, physical. They have to be able to grasp all those things, and those capabilities can be trained, but really none of the other things can. They either have the values or they don't. They either get it or they don't.
Right.
They either want it or they don't, And that's one of the biggest tools now I'm even using. And you weed people out really quickly, that who should be here and who shouldn't.
Sure. Do you do any trait profiling or, I know EOS is big on people analyzers, right? So you got to figure out who your people are before. So what are you doing to make sure you're putting the right people on the right seat?
We usually do like a values quiz that we designed around our values. So we have 5 values, and we do a screening with our HR person before they get an interview. They have to do a phone screening and pass that values quiz.
Awesome.
Which we made it confusing enough that they're not just going to know what the best answer is there, right?
Sure.
Like
what are the answer? What's the answer they're looking for, and put that answer in, right?
Yeah.
No, I get it. It'd be interesting. I'd love to see that.
We have it, so I can definitely send that
awesome.
to you. But we also use one, so if there's ever conflict between employees too, do this thing called Colby.
Yeah.
Colby is not. It's more just how you get your job done, right? Rather than here's a personality test, which personality test, there's nothing wrong with them, but I think they go in a different direction to where you're almost psychoanalyzing people rather than trying to just figure out how they work, right?
Yeah. So we've used some of that in the past. We've done a couple of different things. One of the ones that we used a lot was a group called Culture Index. So it's trait profiling, and what it is, instead of personality, it's what's your natural reaction to something from the time you were 12 on? What is your response to things? How are you wired? What makes you tick? And then you learn, it was interesting in dealing with understanding different personalities, because in the restoration space, it requires people that are wired differently to do different things. Mm-hmm. Yes, they still, according to EOS, right? They need to have your values, and, they need to have your vision and the things that go into that. But I learned about, some of the Culture Index calls some architects and calls some technicians and calls some, visionaries. And there's just different tools that go in that.
I found a really cool one the other day, because our integrator with EOS is actually having me do something new she's working with. It's a leadership kind of quiz that's kind of like a Colby, but it's just for leadership.
Okay.
It breaks down what skills you aren't so good at, but then it breaks down the skills that you want to be good at. And then it shows you that divide a little bit. And then you can start working on a couple specific things at a time and start making action plans on those things.
Okay.
But one thing she brought up most recently was really interesting to me. And I can't remember the name of the chart, but it's kind of like a follower, then it goes a follower leader, follower leader, then it goes a leader follower, then a leader. So that's kind of like your chain of command in your company. So you start with your actual leadership group.
Sure.
Under that, you'd have your leader followers, which are like your management group. Under that, you'd have more, leads, I guess I could call them. And then under that are just pretty much laborers, technicians, whatever you want to call them there.
That would be your followers, right? At the bottom.
Followers,
and how that works. And see, that's the thing is like it takes all of those, right?
Yep.
I learned the uniqueness of some of that when understanding some of the trait profiling and some of the what you're talking about, like followers. Like there are individuals, Dave, believe it or not, there are people that you have to show them what to do. Yeah. And then you have to make sure they understand exactly what it is that you're showing them, because they're not going to have any
initiative. And then you still have to verify that they did it right.
Right. So like, dude, I'm telling you, there are people.
Show them how to do it.
I've experienced this. Like, so for instance, as an example, like you're showing somebody how to paint a room and you put the paint bucket out over here, right? And you roll the paint on the painter and then you start rolling it on the ceiling or the wall or whatever. And then you work your way and you're like, okay, I just need you to paint all the way this whole wall, right? And it's 50 feet away to finish this wall. They're going to leave the paint tray in the exact same spot instead of moving it with them. They're going to walk all the way back because you didn't tell them to move the paint tray with them as they went.
One of the most interesting things I ever did was the Vineyard Winery. That was my favorite job I ever had, I'd have to say, because I just had a dog that followed me around the vineyard. I lived on the vineyard. I drank wine all day, whatever. It was amazing. But anyway, every spring, it's usually pretty cold in spring. Before anything buds, you have to go through and cut off all the old new vines, and you cut them down so you just leave like a little extra there. Okay. And I guess all the people they've had do this in the past take like weeks to do it, tons of labor costs. It's just super expensive. Yeah. I did it with 3 people because I built this system to do it super efficiently and fast with a gator like following the crew. So there's 3 of us. We did it in a week and a half, I think. Killed out all the vines. I mean, it was hard work. There's a lot of long hours. I'm not saying we didn't overdo some hours and stuff, but at the same time, I saved them like 3 times the amount they had paid every single year before in labor. So like, it's just about finding that efficient path sometimes, but you're right. Most people do not think in an efficient path.
No.
They are there to listen and follow your order of the way you say to do it. And if you miss a step or you don't clarify a step, it's not going to follow the path you just gave them. So you have to verify that they understood it.
So that makes me think, like listening to this podcast, talking to you right now, knowing you, and then what you just said in that last statement, you're a big process guy. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about, because you would attribute what you just did in terms of the vine business, that having the right process in place had made you successful there and has made you successful here. Now, you fell into some good opportunities as a result of getting opened at the right time, right?
That was also good people too, because I was the one that got to hire the right people to do that job that were going to follow me, and they could understand what I was doing too, and believed in, understood and got what I was doing. They knew I wasn't leading them down some weird path,
Right.
So that's part of it as well. But so what was the question again? I think
really it's just kind of talking about how processes. What is your perception of processes, and how do processes make you successful? Or
processes are everything. So before I even started this company, in my job management system, I think we built out about 400 different compliances. But along with those compliances, we'd already mapped where they all fell in the process. And I did this all backwards at one point in time, to where I was building all these different checklists. Like you and I have this thing called know-how. I don't know if you use know-how.
Mm-hmm.
But know-how is this great thing for checklists, right? And you can kind of build procedures above the checklists in know-how, but it has a hard time of showing you like a core process map. And I've been talking to them. I think they need to add that. Like they need to have a place where you can put your core processes. You can see how they go across different parts of your group. Like you could have your accountability chart and watch them kind of go in between people. But that your core processes can be looked at like a higher level. And then once you have your core processes, you should have procedures under them. And then once you have your procedures, then you can start making all of your little checklists to get that procedure done, which is fine. But without the map, it's just a lot of information in one place that nobody knows which part they're looking at, right?
Sure.
but you do need to map it as well. So that's, I don't know, that's how my brain.
So processes and organization of processes is significant in your mind, the way you operate.
Yes.
What do you, you're obviously very entrepreneurial. Where do you think you line up with the rest of what I'm going to say? We'll start with the restoration space. Do you think most business owners are process driven the same way you are, or do you think you're more data process driven than most?
Say that I'm more, because I've met so many business owners. Now in core, I've gotten to meet a lot more guys like me, which is amazing. That's amazing, because before core, I really hadn't met many at all. I'd met guys that have been doing restoration for, they say, 30, 40 years, and you're talking to them about the simplest process, and they're like, huh?
Yeah.
So,
but those are still those guys that are trying to hit that $1 million mark, right? They're still trying to get there.
Yeah. Well, some of them are. Some of these guys were $15 million, and you're like, how did you even? I mean, I guess if you spent 40 years at it, maybe, Yeah. But at the same time, like it is something that can be taught, because that is just, it's a capability. I don't find it's not a value. It's not getting it. It's not wanting it. That's just a capability that can be taught, and you can become good at the processes.
Sure.
It's just most people don't know where to start with it, because like I said, with know-how, I feel like most people are like, okay, well, we have all these different things we do. Let's just list them all out and make a bunch of checklists. That's great. But unless you start at the top and start very simple and make some silos where these things can fall, you are going to be so confused by the time you make 5 of them that you're not even.
And where along this path do I check that part off if I don't have it categorized correctly? And that's one of the things for us. Like, I mean, what I say all the time is the reason I built a software company is I'm not smart enough to run a restoration company. So I had to figure out how to build a software to make that work. Right. But that's what we did in a lot of cases, was like, we try to automate it so that really anybody can follow the path and hit the right things that we're trying to look for. And, it's interesting to try to navigate that and the different personalities behind business that do things differently.
There was a book I read quite a while ago. It was basically following the path of like McDonald's and how they really started making their processes. And I mean, a lot of that, it's not what made me good. It made me better at the processes I was building at the time, because listening to that book and just seeing how they were putting things together at first, like McDonald's didn't become like one of the masters at building a fast food franchise just overnight. It took them years to like start at the top and make this big silo, make maybe like 4 big silos. And then they start breaking it down into something smaller. Then they break it down into something smaller. But it takes a lot of time to put that all together.
Sure. Yeah. They've done it well, right?
Yeah.
And it's unique to watch somebody like McDonald's with the growth that they've had, because you can get a better hamburger.
Yeah. But I mean, what they really got done is franchising.
That's right. They've done all that well. They created processes so it happens the exact same way throughout the world. So that really,
it can be franchisable first, right?
Right.
Yeah.
They've done amazing with all that. So they've figured out processes very well to make that work. So tell me something like what is something that now that you wish you would have known when you started?
I think most of the stuff I'm figuring out still, and I don't think I'll ever stop learning about, that I really wish I would have known when I started, is all the financial education, as far as like how all the things you need to know as you scale up financially. Because it's great to think that, next year I want to be a $1 million company. But what does that mean financially? Next year I want to be a $5 million company. What does that mean financially? Next year I want to be a $15 million. They all mean different things. That's something I didn't know. I didn't know each step has a different, basically you need a certain amount of money to back that, number one. It depends what kind of growth, right? But then there's all these ways to actually run data on your financials that you have to know how to do, or you'll just crash and burn. Like, you have to run your company off financial data or you die. And that, I think that's more of a $15 million problem, maybe, because I've seen companies run at 5 million and not need to do that.
Sure.
But if you have the aspirations to get above 10, you probably should
understand those
really
numbers.
start educating yourself on finances.
What's funny about all of that is, I mean, we know some of the same people, right? And I know a lot of restoration companies, a lot of service industry companies. And I've got a friend that runs a $72 million HVAC company. I know a lot of restoration companies that are running $10 million. There's one in our group that's running $45 million. Yep. And they're absolutely crushing it. But there's some $10 million guys out there that in 10 million, their profit is $1 million.
Yep.
And I know for us, we've run 4.5, 5 and had $1.5 million profit on 4.5,
yep.
5. So
it completely depends on your book of business. Number one, yeah. It depends on what, is it more recon? Is it more MIT? Is it more referrals for abatements and contents? What is it? What is it first? And then who are you getting it from? If you're getting it from TPA, sure. It's lower, so on and so forth. And we knew that getting out of the gate, that recon and TPAs were going to be our stepping stones. So we used them as such. But we also knew they were only stepping stones, and eventually we were going to start cutting away at these things.
Yeah,
I just looked at my numbers with my business development guy, man, it was amazing. $3 million lost last year on all the places we wanted to lose it. $3 million gained this year in all the places we wanted to gain it. So no real loss in there.
Yeah.
At the same time, we cut.
And let's clarify, you're talking revenue right now.
Yeah.
Clarify for these guys, you're talking revenue. You offset your revenue, scrubbing TPA. So some of the guys that listen to this aren't going to know what really that means, but that's a third-party administration.
The best analogy I can do is I lost some fat and I gained some muscle.
There you go.
So the profit margins are the high profit margins are the muscle, and the low profit margins are the fat.
Yeah.
Or the negative profit margins are the fat.
And that's great to talk about in terms of one of the points that I wanted to make was you said a little bit earlier, some guys are looking to make 10 million, some are looking to make 15. Mm-hmm. But literally there are people that'll run those numbers and make no money.
Yep.
They're running big revenue numbers and making zero profit because they think they're doing great because they know what their revenue is, and that's what they want to talk about.
I'm not even going to lie. So like in our third year, that was our year of struggle. So that's where we hit our $0. But at the same time, we knew, okay, we're hitting a cap. We also just grew from 0 to 12 million in 2 years. We were going to feel some pain eventually for doing that. Well, and that was more of my startup costs coming back to bite me in the butt a little bit. But at the same time, even if I would have taken all that out, it's still not enough. So I knew I had to fix some things. So that's when I decided I'm going to put an operational system.
And that's part of your cost too. Some of your money you spent was putting things in place for scalable growth. And see, so I don't look at that and go, wow, that sucks, right? But because I think just knowing you, knowing who you're tied to, knowing what's happening, I would anticipate that you're going to have some good growth and that profitability is going to be big, right?
Yes.
And I think I love it, right? I'm excited about it. What's a mistake that you may have made or you have seen that is hard to fix in business?
Some of the biggest mistakes can be putting your trust into the wrong person. So this comes back to people, man. Sure. For me, a lot of things come back to the right people, right seat, because I think that's where a lot of it begins. And then you think you have the right person. Back then, like this one mistake I'm talking about, back then we thought we had it all figured out on how to get the right people because we've done so great so far. We're like, man, we already have this down. We'll find this guy, put him in this seat. But he was the wrong guy all around, and he was really good at hiding that. But when we found out, it was way too late.
Yeah, and caused a lot of problems.
The damage, even after he was gone, continued. So and it continued for about another year. So that's one person can make just everything fold if you don't do it.
Sure. Yeah. So then the next question that would come from that is, what's the best decision, or it's one of the ones that I know is on my list at some level. What's the best decision you made as a business owner? And I would say hearing that it's implementing some things like EOS, right? And finding people.
100%. The best thing I've ever done as a business owner is the operation system. I mean, 100%. So I know there's a bunch of other ones out there, so I don't want to say it's just EOS. Of course, scaling up. I think the other one's like KLB or something. I can't remember.
Something, yeah.
But I mean, just having somewhere that keeps everybody swimming in the same direction, keeping everybody accountable, helping you find the right people in the right seat. I can't think of anything better. I wish I would have had it at the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, me too.
And for the last 3 companies I managed, it
would have made a huge difference. And for us, the same thing, right? Like we're in the process of still implementing it, right? Like we're using it. We've created a lot of processes. I mean, I recognize that I needed processes, which is why I even built software. But like to do them right, like you need an operating system to understand.
Software is only as good as
it's only a tool.
As the people behind it.
That's right. It's only a tool.
Whatever I'm using. I mean, it could be Matterport. Let's just call out something that doesn't even have to do with managing a job. Like Matterport's only as good as the people using it. If I don't really get them behind it, and then everybody's using it properly, and everybody's actually like uploading it to the right people properly. Yeah. It's just a big piece of junk that they haul around in their truck. Right?
Correct. Yeah. So the process behind all of it makes it huge. Yeah. And I love it, man. I love being able to, I mean, honestly, this could become an EOS podcast. They may hear this and be like, hey, can we use this on our, and I'm like, yes, you can use this. I'm sure Dave would agree because it's been great to implement, and it's fun to start watching some of those. With the entrepreneurial spirit, I kind of rail against all corporate policies and rules and all those things naturally, the way I'm wired. But you learn as you're growing the value and necessity of having those types of things in place. And I think EOS does it well. I know our buddy Russ, he uses scaling up and he's had great success with that. He runs a really, really great company, really tight ship in Phoenix. And I'm going to have him on too at some point. So I'll probably get this conversation on his side as well. But I mean, for me, I hear you saying, because this is about alleviating pains in business, right? And helping those that are starting off or hitting ceilings or whatever, going, hey, what are some steps and things that I can do to kind of get past that or navigate it? And honestly, you would say operating systems. EOS for you is one of those things.
It is.
Tools that fix those problems.
What's that?
Tools that help fix problems.
Tools that help fix the problems. And then, I mean, each one of those tools is going to lead you where you need to go. Like I said, it solves the people thing. It solves the value thing. It even solves the vision thing. I don't know. It solves the main characters in that. So, and traction is just something that comes out of all of it, right?
Yeah.
So you're getting traction from all the things that you do. So,
sure.
Yeah,
sure. So, and I think, honestly, I'll have Martise and the guys that put this podcast together, when they post it out, I'll have them put some links to, where they can find EOS. Because based on this conversation, it's like, yes, and I agree, right? Like the operating system. So for those who are hearing us say EOS, it's a group, then it's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's EOSworldwide.com, I think is where their stuff is.
The book is the original book. There's a
Traction is the one that I listened to. Gino Wickman and somebody else. Gino Wickman's the name I know.
Gino Wickman's the main one. And then he has several other books that kind of fall under those for different people in the organization.
Yeah. And it's great. That's great information, man. Like, there's tools, like there's charts and people analyzers and VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, to help you understand. But even having
somebody like a integrator or an implementer to help a company put that together, I feel like that's another important part of it.
Sure.
There's some people that can do that on their own, but that might be more like a Russ.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm just going to figure it out on my own, man. Like, I have enough going on. I needed that person to kind of run it in the background I'm fine as long as I have that support, but at least they give me support to actually get it running.
Sure. No, and I think that's great. Like there's a lot of good information on the podcast, man. So is there anything that you would want to say that I haven't asked you a question about? And we've already kind of crested our time. So I don't want to keep you tied up.
I think we hit a lot of buckets there. So I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, Dave, thanks for being on here with me. I appreciate it. Everybody, this is Dave Grove from BYLT in Maryland, restoration company that does a really great job for us out there, and a friend of mine, and I'm happy to have him on here. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, man. Have a good rest of your day.
This has been a Business Aspirin, Pain Relief for Business podcast. If you're a business owner trying to overcome your business pains, follow us on Apple Podcasts or visit our website for more information, job-docs.com.